created the image on the shroud, which speaks of a new type of physics which we have nothing about, i.e. the resurrection. Gee, what a concept.
Is any of this research available online?
There's a wonderful book on it. Let me see if my phone will reach into my... I have this right by my bedside. I look at it often because I just love it. I mean, I just love it because it's so cool. It just, it's like we estimate him. We as human beings, we just like to put him in our little box, and it's called The Case for Christ's Resurrection.
Okay.
And it's all about the shroud. And some of it's really good. We just read through it, but towards the end they really get into that. Just a fascinating book, The Case for Christ's Resurrection. There's also another one which I thought, let me see if I have that one here. No, I don't know what I did with it. There's another one too which is also really, really good. But The Case for Christ's Resurrection is he really gets into the shroud. Let me see if I can find it.
Interesting. Yeah, worth to looking into, definitely. Hey, listen, I want to change a little bit the gear, as it were. I was reading in your topic list of the things that you discuss in your Nephilim books, and there was one there that I would like to ask a little bit more about.
Sure.
The Merovingian Heresy. Tell us about that.
Yes. When that book came out, Nephilim 2, it was before Dan Brown's big blockbuster, The Da Vinci Code. And without knowing he was working on the Da Vinci Code, I did a little sidebar in Nephilim 2, The Unholy Deception, about the Merovingian Heresy. And the Merovingian Heresy, which of course he based his entire book on. And I read the book. I mean, it's a fast-paced novel, and it's written well. He knows his craft. But it's like, it's like, what's the deal here? Why is this book, sold 40 million copies?
Yeah.
I have the same information in Nephilim 2, and, we've sold about 30,000 copies. So, huge difference. I wish we had a number reversal. But I speak about it because at the time I was actually looking at the same text, which, by the way, he won in court when he looked at Holy Blood and Holy Grail. That's where he got most of the material from. And I was looking at that and looking at Da Vinci's work and, did this whole study in it, and then of course came upon the Merovingian Heresy, which is simply this: that Jesus didn't die. He was they hustled him away. He was married to Mary Magdalene, and they had a child, and the child. We all know the story from Dan Brown, but it's called the Merovingian Heresy, and it's been around forever. And of course that launches into European bloodlines and exactly what Dan Brown says, and that the European bloodlines will somehow trace their lineage back to Christ, and I think that nothing could be further from the truth. It's just, I think he loved Mary Magdalene. I really do. I think, and it may be even, and this some people think is blasphemy. It shouldn't be. I think as a man, remember, he's a man and he's also God. So he's got this duality thing, but he's also the new Adam. He's the perfect man. He never blows it, not even once. So it's like, it's pretty amazing. But as a man, we don't know about Mary Magdalene. They say that she was a prostitute. She wasn't a prostitute. That's just complete and utter fabrication by the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages. Nothing to do with that. So, in some ways, once again, the Church shoots itself in its foot. They twist something and they cover this thing up, and it looks like it's a conspiracy when it's not. It's simply bad theology by the things of the Church during the Middle Ages, which was ridiculous. Okay. But I honestly believed that, and when you think about this, who's the first person that sees the risen Christ? It's Mary Magdalene. That's the first person who sees him, and she falls to his feet and she goes, "Rabboni, Master," and he just goes, "Don't touch me, I haven't yet ascended to my Father." And I think there's a reason for that, and I think he loved her, and I think as he couldn't act on that love because he's God, so he can't act on it, but he loved her in a way that a man might have taken a wife had he been able to. Now that's all conjecture and all theory, and you can burn me on the stake after the show. but I honestly believe that, and this isn't scriptural. I'm just traveling. Why her? Why the deep affinity between them? And I think as a man, as a human, because he was human, right? And he had those emotions. I think he loved her and would have taken her perhaps as a wife, but of course he can't because he's also God. So he knows that he can, but there's a special relationship between them, but it's different than than what Dan Brown says that they ever have sex and all this other stuff. It's preposterous. I don't believe that for 1 second. He had a mission, and he knew what it was, and he was here for one thing: the salvation of all mankind, and that's what he achieved at the cross when he was completely bruised, crushed, and basically killed for us. And from him, new life, our life, if we decide to become born again, if we ask, things change. And that's how I perceive it anyway.
This about the Merovingian bloodline, in what context, more beyond what you have described, would you think that this is important today? I have my own little theory about this, but do you have any ideas about that? Why is this interesting at all, beyond the fact that this, of course, has religious, implications and so forth? But is there something more behind here, do you think?
Well, there may be. The Luciferian agenda, or the Luciferian endgame, is very complex. It's just not this one little thing, and that's why, like in the first hour, we discussed what I believe is the Luciferian dialectic happening in Iraq with the King of Jordan. That's just one end of it. The Illuminati and the Illuminati bloodlines that allegedly trace some of their bloodlines back to Yeshua may factor into part of the mix as people proclaim that, well, he really wasn't God. He was actually an E.T. walk-in, and the miracles were caused by E.T. And again, this is like, I'm not making this up. There's a guy I quote in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural who's a Presbyterian minister. His name is Barry Downing Jr. And Downing cites and believes and puts in print and signs his name to it that all the miracles of both the Old and New Testament were caused directly by E.T. intervention. Everything caused by direct E.T. intervention. Parting of the Red Sea, E.T. Moses receiving the Ten Commandments, E.T. Passover, E.T. Jesus walking on water, E.T. Lazarus rising from the dead, E.T. Jesus' transfiguration, E.T. And on it goes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. This is interesting, and this seems to be something that comes up now and then. Some Roman Catholic bishop, Donald Peloty, I might be butchering his last name there, but he recently said that he was visited by what he refers to as little people wearing masks.
Yeah, I read that.
You read that, yeah.
Right.
It's the same thing here. What's going on here? Are these people being manipulated on some level by something else, or is this actually E.T.?
Without getting into my, the Luciferian endgame, that's why people need to buy the book. It's all right there, and it's, for $10, go to my website, buy the book, and we'll send it to you, and there's a wealth of information. 20 years of research went into that thing, and it went into the Nephilim series. But there's a lot of stuff I draw from. But here's the rub: the Luciferian deception, the Luciferian endgame, is simply this: they, when they finally reveal themselves, will tell us that they, E.T., were genetically manipulated us from primitive mankind, that they were responsible for all the world's great religions. But now they'll show us who God really is, and that's where it's going to go. And so the Bible talks about that the man of sin, the Antichrist, will not be revealed until the great falling away happens first. And there's different theological positions on this. I realize that, but in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, I delve into this thing about the great falling away, the coming great deception, the Luciferian endgame. And this, can you imagine? If you're not rooted and grounded, if you don't have a mystical union, a mystical communion, a mystical relationship with the living God, if you don't have that, you'll be deceived. It's real simple. You'll believe a lie, which again is prophesied in 2 Thessalonians. You'll look right at this stuff and go, well, there it is. They got holographic film of Jesus rising from the dead, being supported by E.T. And hey, look, there's this Presbyterian minister, Robert Downey Jr., who's telling us that that this is true, and people will believe a lie. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. That's why you need to get the book, because it doesn't do it justice to give a 2 or even a 5 or even a 10-minute talking point on it, because you can't really go into the cross references and go into where I drew this stuff from, and go read it yourself. Get Downing's book and read it. Find out that I'm not making this stuff up. But I think it ties right into the whole Luciferian agenda, the whole Luciferian endgame. And I think we're looking at it. It's manifesting now. It's manifesting all around us, the supernatural stuff. It's ramping up. And the only people who don't want to look at this stuff are people with heads in the sand. I mean, they just, anybody who can say, after all this time, that crop circles and UFOs, like cattle mutilations and abductions, are somehow the figments of people's imagination. I mean, at this point, it's like, come on, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
maybe
lay it down.
Maybe we can kind of round things off on this note. That you mentioned crop circles here. And again, this is a phenomenon that has been going on since the mid 70s, 80s, as you said then. I find it interesting for a number of reasons, but what do you think is the message here, and what is it? Do you have an idea or a theory?
Yeah, I just think once again it's another leg of the Hedra, another tentacle of the Hedra, or another head of this beast, another tentacle of the Luciferian deception, the Luciferian endgame, is to show signs that we can do whatever we want to do, whenever we want to do it, because we're technologically superior than you. And some of these signs, point to. I mean, I actually interviewed a guy in the book, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, Stuart Dyke, and he's been researching crop circles for 20 years, and he has a completely different worldview than I did, or do. So, he comes at it from a totally different viewpoint, worldview than I do. He's not sure what he's looking at. He only knows that this stuff is going on, and it is continual. And some of the formations are absolutely stunning, just stunning.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, who, why, what, where, and how. What really is the end game? And of course, it creates the same type of thing as the abductions and all this stuff. It just creates a sense of mystery, and when they finally come and they pull all the stops out, I mean, it'll be a global mega lever shift, a global paradigm shift. Boom, that's it. All bets are off when it happens, and someone like me who won't shift will be viewed as a dinosaur, a Neanderthal, an idiot. How can you possibly... They've got the holographic film of Jesus walking on water and rising from the dead. Come on, Lynn. You know this whole thing was a ruse. They manipulated us genetically 30,000 years ago. Here, look at the samples they show us. They've got it all on film. How can you believe this stuff is really real? There it is.
That's an interesting point.
That's where it's going.
Do you think
that's where it's going?
Do you think that in the end that this has to do then with... I mean, again, what is evidence? What is scientific evidence? What can be doctored? What can not be, and so forth? So, in the end, do you think that this has to do with faith, and that is what decides in this matter? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I believe that a person needs to be born again. I mean, I'm not making this up. That's what Jesus said that 2,000 years ago, and that's the whole purpose of the work of the cross, like we talked about. Is like his death brings us life if we want it. And I'm not talking about meditation or rosaries or beads or mass or do's or don'ts or any of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being led mystically by the Spirit of a living God. And we've got documents that show us from the first century when this band of, for lack of a better word, bozos, because they were. I mean, the apostles were not these great theologians. I mean, they were fishermen. They were illiterate for the most part. Illiterate men. They walk with Yeshua for 3.5 years during his ministry, and in the end they all leave him, and Peter denies him, 3 times before the cock crows. I mean, it's a joke. It's a total joke. We see who they are, and yet we see after that when Jesus tells them, "Hey, go back in Jerusalem, wait for the Holy Spirit, because He's the Comforter. He'll teach you in all things." And it's made available for every single person on this planet. That's the good news. That's what people don't get. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. You just ask, and guess what? It happens. That's all I did. I wasn't in a church service. I read a book. I was alone in my room, and I asked. And, 30 days later, everything changed. It was the most profound mystical experience I've ever had. And that was 28 years ago, and it's continuing today, or 27 years ago. It's continuing today, constantly. And in visions and words and studying Scripture and watching prophecy being fulfilled, so it's an ongoing mystical experience. And in fact, there's one, we're talking about this, there's one epistle by John, a letter. I love these names that the Latins, the church gives it and all this stuff. It's just a letter. The guy wrote a letter, okay? He got up one morning and he said, I better write a letter to these guys because they need to know what's going on. So he sits down and he gets, a quill out. He probably had what's called in the ancient world a umensuensis, which these guys were